Hello, my gentle and of course very modern apes. My name is Erica. I'm Gutsit Gibbon, and today what you are fixing to see is a chunk from a big stream that I did, like, I don't know how long it would be when you're watching this video, but to me, it was like last week. Yeah, most of this intro is going to be copied and pasted from the intro of the previous chunk of this stream that I released to you outside of the context of that live stream. It is what it is. I did that stream to raise money for fieldwork that I was going on, and then also that a friend of the channel was going on. And if you're seeing this video, that means I'm currently out doing that fieldwork, and I wanted to have some stuff to release whilst I was absent. There are 4 of these stream chunks that I'm releasing, and this is video 3 of 4. There's also other videos releasing. I've got like a nice 2 a week pattern going on. Don't get used to it. But all of that to say that the video you're about to see is an unedited chunk from that stream where me and a bunch of my friends dunk on creationism, and the video that you're watching right now is the chunk where we tried to cover some of like a video on whale evolution where creationists are trying to debunk whale evolution, and we did not get nearly as far on this video as I wanted to. So you can definitely expect to get a video from me that's like a much more concise version of like, how do we know that cetaceans, modern day cetaceans, evolved from land-dwelling ancestors, and one that tackles the portion of this video by Donnie and company that we didn't get to in the stream that goes through the fossil evidence. So I'm gonna do that. That's gonna happen eventually. I was planning on doing it and then putting it in this video, like a nice little stream breakup where I go through it, but like, I just don't have time to do that, to be perfectly honest. I'm leaving in like 4 days from when I'm recording this. Anyways, if you want to watch the whole stream, it's like 11 hours long and you can find it like on my channel, but I wanted to release it in digestible chunks, like digestible by this channel standards. Again, these are unedited. I really just wanted to get them out there in smaller pieces, so there's gonna be some banter, there's gonna be some hiccups, but I hope you enjoy it. You can kind of think of it as like something to put on while you're cleaning your house or your garage or falling asleep. And while you're engaging in those luxurious activities, you can picture me, currently out in the dirt in West Kenya, scrounging around for cool fossils, genuinely having the time of my life. Thanks to you guys.
Scott, before we get started, I'm in this weird position because I find Donnie very agreeable. I think it's easy to get along with Donnie, but the branding, bro, just all the truth and the truth and the truth and everything's the truth, and then y'all just sit up here and tell lies. It just
okay.
Look, anyone with the word truth in their username probably has nothing to do with truth.
Is it Jackson?
I have found at least some footage of Raw Matt working out. And an interview he did with an Eternal Life channel in a graveyard.
Wow.
If we want to see any of that absurdity.
Here's the thing. I do want to see that, but I'm not putting that shit on my stream. I don't want to get demonetized for accidentally like linking to somebody who very well might be on the FBI's most wanted list. So
your partner comes in. Okay, I thought you were debunking creation, and like Donnie's just working out bench pressing. He's like, what's going on here, Erica?
What did Jackson say about Raw Matt? A chemotherapy patient? That is the most savage thing I've ever heard Jackson say in my life.
But does he have the eye of the tiger?
Therein lies the question. Okay, you guys, we got this video. I'm starting it. Let's get this started. And I'm gonna let it play. When we stop, I gotta go get another drink. So
line of evidence that the evolutionary community looks to. For not only human evolution, but also whale evolution. And so the question here on the screen, how do creationists, which you and I are, address the famous whale series? So you got Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Rhodocetus, Basilosaurus, for example. What are your overall thoughts on that series?
Yeah, whole article on this, and it's pretty clear to me that what you are doing is taking different animals and lining them up, even though they are clearly different animals. Pakicetus, for example, and the others, they're clearly different animals, different category, and you're lining them up somewhat arbitrarily. Interesting, I went to a conference once, and the professor there was at the University of Kansas, and he was asked what is the most persuasive fossil evidence for evolution, period. And at the conference, he gave the whale. And I thought, that is really bad. If this is the best evidence, what does that say about all the other evidence in that? I think it's pretty pathetic. And again, you believe in evolution, therefore, the Pakicetus and so on, these have to be missing links. But in many ways, if you do comparisons, even from the printed literature, you can see that they're just very different kinds of animals. It's like you line up apes and you start out with chimp and you gorilla and then humans, you line them all up and you claim that one evolved from the other, when that is pretty questionable because.
So, okay, I sped him up, but I'm just going to make a quick note here. Nobody is saying that humans evolved from chimps and gorillas, right? These are contemporaneous animals that share a common ancestor. And also, I find it very shocking that we would propose the whale series to be the best as far as the lineages that we have support for. Personally, I'd pick the hominins, but that's just because I know them.
I mean, whales are really good, and they're a fascinating lineage. But yeah, hominins might be better.
Well,
at least right now.
Some people say you might avoid hominins just because people get mad when you study human evolution, right? So unfortunately, biology educators still sit around and debate how useful it is to discuss the hominin example. But it's still the same thing, right? Which he literally called it the series. He said the whale series. And it invokes that like march of progress. And he says these are clearly different animals, and then they're lining them up. No, you're lining them up. Right? Like we understand the branching pattern, right? And he's trying to misrepresent that branching nature of evolution and to say, oh, they just line up a series. It's kind of like a dog, and then it jumps into an alligator looking thing, and then it's a whale, and it's that same thing where that march of progress, for those who know what I'm talking about, the march of progress, it's that thing you see when you line up like a chimp and then you put all the other hominins and then you show Homo erectus and then you show Homo sapiens and you do so in a line. And that just comes from a book that also didn't have this misunderstanding. They explained it accurately. They just happened to show them and depict them that way. And so we're still dealing with this. We're still dealing with their inability to even explain the basic branching nature of evolution in an honest fashion.
Yeah, and you're going to see a little bit later, right? Like, because this is one of the other ones that I skimmed. I didn't skim over the radiometric dating one, but in this, there's a portion where when Donnie and Ron Matt are making their argument against the fossils, they use these quotations where people are saying like, oh yeah, and actually this guy might bring it up too, but where they talk about like, oh yeah, Pakicetus or Ambulocetus, whichever the two they're discussing, it's not directly on the line. Yeah, no one is saying it is. Right? Like these are groups begetting groups in a rather bushy pattern that are displaying that morphologic change over geologic time that would be required to go from a terrestrial artiodactyl to what we see in modern cetaceans. Like it's not that complicated, in my opinion, but
yeah. So you're saying in addition to misrepresenting the branching, they're also misrepresenting the claim of direct ancestry. We're not necessarily this descended directly from this.
Right.
And that's another one of those misconceptions they throw in about all these things.
They're saying that that's what evolutionists say, and then they use quotes from professionals who are saying that's not the case, but no one's saying that it is, right? Like
exactly.
Evolutionists say XYZ is the straw man here. All right, keep going.
They not only have to evolve new traits, but have to lose a lot of traits. And right. I see that as I don't remember all the points in my article, but I did in quite a long article cover this in quite a bit of detail.
Right. And I think the point holds true even to whale evolution that you made earlier with human evolution, that a lot of the points are contested. I mean, Ambulocetus, I think it was Peter Gingrich, recently said that Ambulocetus must not be in that main lineage because the eyes are at the top of its head, kind of like an alligator. And so how can it therefore be in that main lineage? But
that was the one I was thinking. It ended up being there. But like, yes. No one is saying, to my knowledge, that the cetacean series, quote unquote, that is presented is anagenetic. right? Like,
Yeah,
who's
no.
out here
Right.
saying this?
That's basically never been the case for fossils.
Exactly.
There are very few exceptions. Like Triceratops porus to Triceratops horridus is probably anagenetic. The three species
you beat
of
me to
the
the punch, Dapper. I was literally just about to say that.
The three species of the genus Thalassocnus, which is a series of increasingly aquatic sloths, that's probably anagenetic. But like, other than those two extremely unusual circumstances, like no one's really arguing for anagenesis in fossil lineages.
People will argue for Australopithecus anamensis to afarensis sometimes as well, but or sometimes from Africanus to Sediba as well. But it depends on who you talk about.
Yeah, I have heard it speculated, but even then, most people who do so see that as rare, that we would even have the type of evidence to strongly inclinate that we had the direct ancestor. For the most part, that's just not how we think about fossil species, because we don't know enough.
Right.
Well, the only reason they
I'm
propose
sorry,
it is because it's the same location and you're tracking changes on the surface of teeth. Like it's coming down to like the cusps of given molars and things of that nature. So it's they take it as an easier case to make. But as you say, Jay, they're measured when they do it.
So, Erica, I do have to ask, because I've wanted to ask you this for a while, and I now finally have the chance. What do you, like, which species of Australopithecus, if you think it was Australopithecus, do you think is probably ancestral to Homo?
I mean, I'm
do you
kind
think
of a
there are
loyalist.
any good candidates?
Yeah, I think it's afarensis. I think Australopithecus afarensis is an extremely long-lived species in Eastern Africa that seems to beget successful lineage after successful lineage, some of which end up going extinct rather quickly, some of which don't. There are some people that will argue that Australopithecus afarensis, that all of the Australopiths aren't actually what we should be looking at for Homo's emergence, and instead they'll actually point to Kenyanthropus platyops, which is associated with the Lomekwi tool culture, the very first tools that we see in the record at 3.3 million years ago with Kenyanthropus platyops. And some people will argue, though, that Kenyanthropus platyops should just be Australopithecus afarensis, or at most Australopithecus platyops. So it depends on who you talk to, but I think afarensis is so ubiquitous, it's so well known, it's so well represented, and you find so many characters in Australopithecus afarensis that seem to be precursors to simple elaborations that are going to happen in early genus Homo, in the likes of Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis. And the paper that I love to point to for this is Kimball and Vilmore, Australopithecus to Homo, the transition that wasn't. Phenomenal piece showing these continuations of patterns. So
one of Donnie's favorite papers too, because he doesn't understand it.
And Ramat loves it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was just something I was really curious about, because like I'm interested in paleoanth. Like it was something I was considering majoring in, but eventually I decided to stick with dinosaurs. So it's just fascinating to me, but I don't know like where the pulse of the field lies right now. So
I love bioanth. I love paleoanthropology, but there's a reason I study Miocene apes. Like there's a reason my dissertation is not on hominins, and that's because the hominin scene is kind of a nightmare. Just like the Spinosaurus scene, or where Tyrannosaurus, like pick a controversial critter. It's like all hominins are controversial, and everyone is stingy with their fossils. Not everybody, but Tim White is stingy with his fossils.
So, Erica, total hypothetical here, because when I did my master's in bioanth, I was taught pretty much the same thing you were, which wasn't that long ago. But my question is, we also thought there may have been a time where there was, maybe like 4 different hominin species around at the same time. And I'm totally picking your brain, total theory question. But do you think that would have an influence on creationism? Like, I have a hard time believing that, like, I just feel like creationism would hit differently if we had to explain similar species existing in other parts of the world.
So, they actually use it to their advantage. They point to contemporaneity, specifically at places like Olduvai, where you've got Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Paranthropus boisei, I believe, and depending on what you're doing with the Bertille foot, potentially even, and this is strictly me, no one has made this statement.
Sure.
I think it's going to come out. I think the Bertille foot, which is around that same date, so we're looking at like or like in between 2 and 3 million years ago, essentially. That Bertiel foot looks like Ardipithecus to me. And I'm not the first person to say that. So that would suggest that you have another genus of hominin. So we're looking at 4 genera: Paranthropus, Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, and Homo, all living sympatrically, contemporaneously around the Olduvai area. That is insane, because typically we've been like,
wait. Sorry, I tuned out for a minute. You said Ardipithecus was contemporaneous with Homo?
If the Bertiel foot belongs to Ardipithecus, the genus, I don't think it's that far of a stretch to suggest that you've got persistence into when you see first members of Homo at 2.8 million years ago.
How is the first I've heard of this? That's insane.
Because the Bertiel foot isn't defined as Ardipithecus. There's a reason they call it the Bertiel foot, because it's this random foot that has this crazy divergent helix. It looks just like Ardipithecus. I mean, it's a dead ringer. No one's going to say that that's what it is, but there was a really cool talk by Johannes Haile Selassie, the Ardipithecus Kadaba guy, who talks, and I'm not going to say much more about it because it was at the ABAs, and I suspect he's going to publish on it here soon. Like, it's probably in review. But a lot of comparisons between some new material that they've gotten from that region, where the Bertiel foot is, and how potentially, evidently, that Bertiel material is very distinct from the Australopith material that's also there. Like the Australopithecus pyramida.
Maybe it's a foot of a Nephilim.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But Erica, you were saying they use that to their...
Like, is it possible, like, if it has a divergent helix, is it possible it's a member of genus Pan, or...
It could be, but
I don't know how much data you can share. But
No, I mean, from what the Bertiel foot is published, it's not a panin, for sure. This thing's not a panin. It's definitely a hominin. It has features that are well past that divergence. So unless it's some extreme homoplazy going on, that then ends up being lost when you get to Pan, it's a real, like, look up the picture of it, the Bertiel foot. You'll see what I mean. It's a very...
How do I spell it?
Bertele foot, Bertiel foot, or Bertelli foot, some people say. But to answer your question, Jay, yeah, the nature of the contemporaneity is they say, look, see, you have Homo living alongside Australopithecus, living alongside Paranthropus, and then, depending on Bertiel foot, further genera.
Yeah.
So what they say is a result. Oh, and Kenyanthropus, if you want to throw that in there as well, with some earlier hominins, not Homo. But they point to that and they say one couldn't possibly beget the other. One genus can't beget the other, which means that for sure Homo didn't come from Australopithecus, because you have Homo being contemporaneous with Australopithecus.
Oh, and so they use that almost to say we had to be created uniquely because we can't come from them. They can't be, none of those groups can be ancestral.
Right. Now, make no mistake, to my understanding, you're not having literally Australopithecus, Homo, and Paranthropus like living in the same
together,
space,
right?
In the same place. Right. Yeah, like it's more like they inhabit this, like they inhabit the same general regions at some points in time. So like Australopithecus sediba, we know from 1.98 million years ago. Homo's around by 1.98. Homo's around by 2.8. Paranthropus is around by 2.7. So Australopithecus, Paranthropus, and Homo, what I'm saying is those three genera shared the world at the same time. And let's see here.
Yeah, and looking at the Bertelli foot, like this is one of the things I absolutely love about paleontology. This is so cool.
So the Bertiel foot is, I should have been more specific when I was saying this earlier. It's speculation to suggest that Ardipithecus makes it past the Bertiel foot. My reasoning for that is because we have no Ardipithecus after 4.4, except for maybe the Bertiel foot or Berteli foot, however you want to say it. It could have made it, an additional 500,000 years, maybe not, but at least it's surviving alongside Australopithecus and Kenyanthropus at that 3.4 million year date. Anyways, enough hominins.
No, I thought that was super interesting. Thanks for humoring me.
Before you continue, I'm going to scoot because I have a stream in 5 minutes that I prepared for over the course of the last approximately 30 minutes. So I'm going to go do this. I'm going to wing it, and then I'm going to come back. It's not going to be very long. So I will see all of you fine folks in just a little bit.
Check out Creation Myths. Love Dan's channel.
Do it. Okay, I'm going to let Donnie...
Let's go.
one thing they like to point to, as you know, Dr. Bergman, and your book, which I have behind me, Fossil Forensics, you got an excellent section on this, dealing with the argument that says these whales have a vestigial pelvis, specifically Basilosaurus. They point to these hind limbs that exist, and they say this demonstrates that they used to walk on land as four-legged tetrapods. What's a good way to respond to that, Jerry?
Well, I remember the example I used, but it's not easy to copulate when you're a whale in the water, floating around, etc. And those legs that they have really facilitate copulation. And the same thing is true with snakes that have feet-like appendages. Facilitates copulation, which I don't see how they could copulate without having some type of means of ensuring that the copulation can occur. They go extinct.
Okay.
But they're not.
Okay. I got a few things here.
Therefore,
Dapper, take over. I'm getting another drink.
All right. So, a few things. First of all, if you don't understand how whales can copulate without hind feet or hind legs, let me introduce you to literally every extant whale. Obviously, it's not a requirement, right? Every single extant whale typically has no hind feet. There are occasional extremely rare atavisms, but yeah, the average whale coupling doesn't involve hind feet. So using them as claspers, sure, it might be handy for some prehistoric whales. Not a thing today. So it's obviously not a thing that is required. Further, when it comes to certain snakes that have spurs, that's what they're usually called, but are, they're basically hind legs, and they are used for the same purpose. But again, the vast majority of snake species do not have these claspers, so they are not a requirement for snake feet. But the important thing is, why is it a hip? So if we go to the whales, right, what are the hips used for? Well, in addition to, anchoring several of the pelvic floor muscles that are important for both sexes during reproduction, it also anchors various abdominal muscles and separates them from the muscles that go out into the tail. That's what hips do. There's a distinction between the vertebrae that are anterior to these hips and posterior. Why? Because they're hips. Posterior, you're getting caudal vertebrae. You get some arguably sacral vertebrae right in the middle, and then you're up to lumbar vertebrae as you go anterior to that. Why do they develop an association with the hind limb buds? None of this is necessary if all God is trying to do is like, hey, you need a sticky outy bit so that you can clamp them together to arrange your genitals for penetration. None of this is a requirement. And also, as you go back farther in time, looking at more and more basal cetaceans, farther back in the geological column, you see more and more robust hips. Why is there this sequence? And the fact that a structure currently has a function that has retained from its ancestral function doesn't mean that that isn't evidence of evolution, right? Vestigial doesn't mean, because he's ultimately saying that they're not vestigial or something like that. That's what they always say. Vestigiality has nothing to do with not having a function. It has to do with a reduced function. The only good reason to find whales with hind limbs that are decreasingly robust, getting all the way to the modern period where none of them have external legs at all, is evolution. Pointing out their current use doesn't help with that, because everyone acknowledges their current use as well as their various uses in the past, right? There's no actual scientists out here saying, oh yeah, no, Basilosaurus definitely didn't use its hind legs to facilitate mating. It just doesn't matter. All right, I think I stretched that out long enough, Erica, now that you're back.
Thank you for taking the time, Dapper.
Also,
All
check
right.
the green room, Erica. There was a message for you, so I'm not sure if somebody knew was back there.
Crud. No one. Let's see.
If they're not here, don't worry about it.
I just wanted to, just in case they were like chilling back there. Okay.
Tell them to come
thank
in.
you.
We're talking about cetacean evolution. They seem like a perfect person for it.
Apparently, my use of the word penetration was unexpected by chat.
Oh, did they not like that, or did they love it? No, they loved
apparently
it.
they were just surprised. I don't know.
They loved it. All
Okay,
right,
good.
keep moving.
population has to be successful, and with snakes that have these so-called leg remnants tail, and the same thing with Basilosaurus.
And the fact that Basilosaurus might have more prominent, quote unquote, hind limbs doesn't further their evolutionary
What do you mean,
model.
quote
No, it
unquote,
doesn't. And from
SFT? What else could they be? That's something I want to know. If you don't think these are hips and hind limbs, what do you think they are? They develop from the hind limb buds. They're associated with changes in the vertebral anatomy that are similar to the changes in any other animal where you go from, or well, mammal, where you go from lumbar to sacral to caudal vertebrae. they anchor the same muscles in cetaceans as they do in other mammals. What are they if they're not legs and hips, Donnie? I really want to know. I know that you're probably either going to watch this in the future or you're watching it now. Please let us know. If you don't want to talk to me, okay, that's great. Someone here is someone you can talk to. I know that you and Jay apparently get along pretty well. Tell Jay. He can tell me.
So I think that this is an interesting thing too, right? Because like this whole video, like I said, I skimmed it, and you're going to see more of it here in a minute. But they basically spend the entire time explaining away and trying to accommodate what is effectively precisely to a T what evolutionary theory predicts of cetacean evolution from a terrestrial ancestor. Like they're fumbling to try to explain it all, and you're going to see more of this in a second. But I actually find the concept of the pelvis being used for copulation, it is complete. I don't know what you said, Dabra, but I find it to be completely inconsequential to the conversation. Vestigial, like, pieces, structures, organs, whatever, oftentimes are accepted for new purposes. In fact, most of the time they end up accepted for something, because evolution doesn't tend to maintain useless structures.
Erica, in this case, it's not even an acceptation. I don't know if you guys know this, but mammals often use their pelvises in reproduction.
They do? That's crazy.
Yeah. Many of the people in your chat might either have reproduced themselves as mammals or have parents who reproduced as mammals.
That's crazy.
I mean, Dapper, you say that like dinosaurs don't. Which,
okay, that's true.
I'd say more about you than it does about broader dinosaurs.
Okay, fair. I'll broaden this. Tetrapods as a group have a tendency to have their pelvises intimately involved in the reproduction process.
I'm struggling to think too of an example. Like, is there a single tetrapod out there? Well, I guess
some snakes.
But,
but some snakes. It's not even all snakes. It's some snakes.
Yeah, but then they've also, their entire body is effectively prehensile. Like, they don't have a problem.
I mean, a lot of more primitive snakes, like boa constrictors, still have vestigial hind limbs.
Yeah, there can be some problems. There are some snake species where actually mating can be dangerous because it's a problem to actually align the cloacas, and so you get these things where, like, 100 or so males might all try to simultaneously be the one who happens to line up with this one female who's now currently in danger of being crushed to death in an entire ball of males all trying to mate with her at the same time.
So what you're saying is it's important to test compatibility before settling down. I gotcha.
Sure, we'll go with that as the takeaway.
I love this, right? Like, the entire point of this is that it's like, okay, well, if they're atrophying and losing their hind limbs and the pelvis, why is the pelvis still around? It's like, because it serves a purpose, right? If it's serving a purpose in behavioral ecology, it is going to stick around. There's a reason the legs left, but the pelvis did not. This is precisely what evolution would in fact did predict. Yep. But they're going to take it into goofier places. So let's let them continue.
It's still a muscle attachment point. Even if those muscles are reduced, they're still there.
Actually, some of them are enlarged.
Like moving the tail down or moving the front half of the body down during the up and down motion whales do.
Yeah, it's an important pivot point for whale swimming. They wouldn't be able to swim without that.
Like, it's the point of the vestigial, quote unquote, pelvis that you see. Vestigial doesn't mean useless, right? Vestigial structures can be accepted. The point of it isn't that that it doesn't have a use anymore. The reason it's pointed to is that it's the clear result, the clear snapshot of this current end termination of an evolutionary trajectory that got rid of the hind limbs and reduced the pelvis as a whole. That's why it's important. That's why people point to it, not because it doesn't do anything or it can't do anything. At least not to my knowledge. All right, I'm gonna let him keep going.
I've read, it's pretty clear that they need to have these structures to be able to successfully reproduce.
Well, there's at least one paper from the conventional literature that I read that said, yes, these so-called hind limbs on Basilosaurus were used for reproductive purposes. Yeah. Those muscles and tendons and that structure helps with the reproductive organs.
I'm sorry,
and
so-called
evolution,
hind limbs? They have a knee.
That's they have a knee. They have toes.
Called limbs on Tiktaalik, except worse.
Yeah,
the so-called hind limbs.
Did they still have the pulley joint seen in other artiodactyls?
By Basilosaurus, I'm not sure. I know that they do
no,
in like
And I'm actually curious about it.
Pakicetus
I
and
don't know that.
Ambulus.
Basilosaurus
Ambulocetus.
has an astragalus for sure. I know Basilosaurus has an astragalus. There's a really famous picture that you can see that shows the Basilosaurus astragalus.
I'm looking now because I want to see that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Astragalus.
Yeah, I just looked Basilosaurus astragalus.
Let's see what comes up. Let me take a little peek.
This is what it's like when nerds hang out, everybody.
I'm seeing one for Rhodocetus and Artiocetus.
Googling obscure anatomy stuff. It's crazy.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, no, I see it for Basilosaurus.
There. I knew it was somewhere.
What do you know?
Well, yeah, so okay. Just for those who are still hanging out with us, still watching here. What is a enormous, I mean, how long is Basilosaurus? 50 feet? 60 feet? Something like that?
60 feet, yeah.
Thereabouts. What is a 60-foot long carnivorous cetacean that is completely obligately underwater, does not leave land a single time, doing with the ankle joint of an antelope?
It's a good question.
Why does it have that? The diagnostic characteristic of an antelope. Why does a Basilosaurus have an antelope ankle? Not any ankle. Not an ankle that you can use for copulation. An antelope ankle. An artiodactyl ankle. Why does it have this?
Also, I want to point something out. Donnie is apparently someone who's skeptical about inferring soft tissue anatomy from skeletons. And I just got to say, this guy is just assuming that Basilosaurus had reproductive organs associated with its pelvis. We don't actually know that.
Dude,
there's no direct evidence of that. Why are you just inferring all this stuff, Donnie?
Literally such an inference. You know who would be ashamed is Helmet.
Yeah, Helmet would not be okay with you just assuming that Basilosaurus has its reproductive organs where all the other whales do.
Like, why would it? They didn't preserve the
Now,
fossil.
here's the question. When did whale reproductive organs become internal? Like, fully internal?
That's a phenomenal question.
Probably before the split with hippos, because they also have very heavily internalized reproductive organs. Hippos don't have a scrotum. Their penis is tucked right up inside. It's probably like the common ancestor of Whippomorpha was probably at least semi-aquatic, and there's a fair chance that might be when they started internalizing their male reproductive organs.
I guess, but it is possible that could be convergent, though, too, couldn't it?
Because, it could be, yeah.
Like, elephants have convergently evolved that.
Yeah, but what are typically when you have really closely related lineages or taxa, you tend to, it doesn't mean homoplasia is impossible, but the odds of these closely related lineages both simultaneously evolving it are slim. I say that as somebody who knows, like, with very high confidence that gorillas and chimpanzees independently evolved knuckle walking, but that's because the mechanism of knuckle walking is distinct in the two of them. And I don't know enough about the scrotal anatomy of the hippopotamus.
They don't have a scrotal anatomy. That's the whole point.
Sorry, on that note, shout out to OK in the chat. What the crap just tuned into scrotum?
Hey, this is a biology stream. You're going to hear stuff like scrotum. It's okay. We're all adults.
Yeah, fair.
All right, I'm letting Donnie.
Evolution requires the passing on of genes, right, Dr. Bergman? And so if there's no reproduction, then there's no evolution.
Right. That's it. It's the end.
So a lot of evolutionists, would you see this as a rescue device? So I see a lot admit now, well, okay, the vestigial pelvis does have a function in reproduction, but it's simply a function that's been repurposed. So they used to be hind limbs, but once they started to become reduced as they moved into the water, the ocean, now the function has been repurposed to reproduction.
No,
yeah, they use it. I agree, as a rescue.
Donnie, for that to be true, you would have to think that mammals don't normally use their pelvis in reproduction. Donnie, you have kids.
Oh, yeah, and I was just going to say, like,
kids?
I would assume Donnie's current hardware is useful in both reproduction and waste removal. And his pelvis is involved in also reproduction and locomotion and exercise. I mean, it's just
exercise.
Come on, man.
Does someone want to say the Ben Shapiro quote? because I feel it's relevant here.
Here's my thing, right? So like these guys are accidentally like making the case for selection, right? They're talking about directional and then stabilizing selection because they're like, okay, evolutionists. So if cetaceans are getting rid of their hind limbs, why didn't they get rid of the pelvis too? Because it's necessary for reproduction. Yeah, that's why it stayed. That's why it's there. That's why it didn't leave. Because it's necessary, or at least extremely helpful. It can offer the scantest reproductive edge. It may be that whales can perfectly happily copulate with no pelvis. I don't know. I don't know enough about cetaceans.
No, I can tell you with high confidence that they could not.
Okay, there you go. That's why it's there, because it's necessary. And evolution doesn't typically, if ever, in fact, I think definitionally it cannot remove a structure that is going to be a hindrance or that is necessary for fitness, that the removal would be a hindrance to fitness. It's just not going to do that. That's literally antithetical to the entire point of what natural selection is and what it says.
Yeah, male whales physically could not engage in sex with female whales without those bones. So of course it cannot go away because
it can't leave.
Any male whale without a pelvis.
And like you said, no reproduction, no evolution, no pelvis, no reproduction. This is really, I hate to say it, I think a lot of us on this panel are overqualified to address this one.
Like, it's not that complicated. They're just making our point for us.
Basically.
I think this has got to be just directed exclusively at people who are like, who don't know enough about whale evolution, that they're like, oh, well, the whale pelvis is pointless. And it's like, I don't think anybody who's informed, who's like present in the literature or like doing any work on this has ever said that. Maybe the guy that you know at the bowling alley is saying that, but I don't speak for him. He doesn't speak for me.
Like, that's like saying your mouth is unnecessary for survival.
Right?
It's just, okay. All right, we're going to let him keep.
Technique, and that's reasoning. And of course, reasoning is cheap. When I taught forensics, you can reason all you want to, but you've got to have the evidence. You've got to present it to a jury, and you've got the defendant's attorneys. You don't have the evidence clear.
They did that. They did that for evolution. They literally did that for evolution, and it won. And not only did it win, but the same Bush-appointed judge and randomly selected, well, actually, I don't think they had a jury, but the same Bush-appointed judge was like, and also intelligent design isn't science, it's repackaged creationism, which is not true, right? Like,
the design proponentsists.
You're right. You're right, Dr. Bergman. It has to pass muster in a court of law if it's forensic. And then also evolution did that. Like, I just...
The other attorneys can tear you apart.
You know,
before they go to court,
there's a question I've asked a few creationists now that I've never gotten a good answer for. Like, none of them can ever explain why orcas, Basilosaurus, and mosasaurs are never found in the same layers.
Yeah, despite
I'd
having
love to hear the
the
answer
same
for
niche
that.
and the same habitat. Yeah,
Doug, do you
not
remember,
virtually, just the same niche.
Doug, do you remember asking that in the debate I was in the other day, and the guy's answer was that Basilosaurus had lungs and mosasaurs did not.
Yes, he didn't know mosasaurs had lungs.
Oh no!
We're not joking.
Which, like, also
that's a heavy inference, though.
Yeah, for Helmet, he would be inferring that the lungs of, were there for the Basilosaurus. So.
We can't be certain that Basilosaurus had lungs. That
is so true. Just because it had external, normal, like marine lizard or marine reptiles like style architecture and morphology, and every other marine reptile that has lungs, we can't be certain. Helmet has spoken.
Also, there's the fact that it's literally a lizard, and we have a lot of lizards alive today, and they all have lungs. There's that too.
That's just insane. Like, what a leap of logic.
I have an announcement I'm happy to make, but also sad. Officially raised over $1,000 on the GoFundMe today.
That's fantastic.
Which is absolutely insane. But that also means I've gotten like 30 donations today. I'm not sure I'll be able to keep track of them all, and I'm sorry. But just if you're listening, thank you.
That's so wonderful.
I'll try to personally email as many as I can, but if I do miss you, I am sorry. Thank you.
Also, like, y'all are a part of something. Like, y'all are a part of a thing that's like citizen science, that's like real, that's like you're supporting people's work. Erica can share, it is hard to get funding to do science. And there's not a lot of this where you can go, oh, I just turn to my YouTube community and they'll help me out. But the more of us that can and show results from doing so, like, you literally might be part of how we change the funding or what gets done in science. It can be literally driven by the people. They can say, hey, we want to send you to do this thing, and we're going to send you. That's awesome.
I mean, I don't know the results of my expedition this summer because it hasn't happened yet, but like I am not exaggerating when I say people's generosity tonight may have just made my career.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like I want to try to get that through. Just
Doc, I'm so glad.
Jeez.
Honestly, let me. The best thing you can do, my advice, is take so many pictures, record as much as you can, like little interviews, things like that.
Don't pull an Armitage.
Yeah, don't pull an Armitage, but record as much as you can.
Yeah,
Like,
I know that.
Yeah, keep people in the loop. Like I found that this audience, this particular audience, that we share a lot of overlap with many of us here on this panel, but everybody's curious. They want to know what it's like. Like that's the best part, is being like, oh, I donated $5 and Doc went out there and found the rest of lentil. Like, that's epic. That's so cool to think about and so cool to see. If you can, drum up a video about it. I think
I'm hoping to.
For myself,
I'm borrowing my dad's GoPro and gonna record at least a little bit of every single day.
Yeah, use your phone, like talk about how you feel, string it all together, upload it. You'll be glad to have it later yourself as well, and you can refer back to it. It's really something special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, to what I was talking about earlier, like, I don't know how much of your personal identity you share with your colleagues, but make sure they know that your YouTube community funded this trip.
Make sure they
because
know.
they need to wrap their heads around that, right?
Let me just tell you a delighted. Let me tell you a delighted experience that I've had recently. When I first started this channel, when I first started my PhD, I guess I should say, it was the fall semester in 2021 when I first started my PhD, and my channel had just hit 10K, had just hit 10,000 subscribers. And one of my friends had mentioned in one of our classes, in front of one of my professors who would end up being on my committee, was like, oh yeah, like Erica's got this YouTube channel. And the professor pulled it up and I was like, oh wow, like 10,000 subscribers, like that's pretty cool. And like everybody was like proud, but there was also like almost like a tone of jest, a little bit like, haha, like you've got this YouTube channel. Who's laughing now? It's fun because you get to sit back and I get to be like, look, I'm applying for my NSF, I'm applying for my winter grant, I'm applying for my leaky grant. But while I wait for that money to go through, what helps fund me to get this shit done is my audience. Like it's you guys, it's the people who watch, who allow me to go and do this work. It's not just donations. It's the fact that you guys watch the videos and the Patreon members and like all of that stuff. And I would do this for free. Don't tell anybody, but I would do this for free. Like I do what I do because I love it, not because I'm trying to make money. And that includes
suddenly Erica loses all her patrons.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever. But it's like I do it because it's my passion. I enjoy it, and I think that it's important. That's why I do it. And it takes a shit ton of time. God knows I spend a lot of time on this channel making videos and editing and re-recording and all that, breaking scripts and all that kind of stuff. But it's my utmost pleasure to do it. And this is like corny and cheesy and whatever, but like it's lovely to get the funding and to get the donations and things like that. What it's really about is when I get the emails from the odd person who's like, the channel made a difference. The channel helped me. Like I enjoy it. Me and my kid bond over it, or me and my mom bond over it, or we enjoyed this video, or this made me think, or I get an email of somebody who's like, oh, I was thinking about your video about blah, 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 blah. That shit makes it worth it. Nothing else in the world, like nothing else under the sun, because it's a connection that you're making with somebody who you've never met, who's never met you, and you're bonding over this shared love of science and curiosity and learning and this wonderful world that we find ourselves in. I think that's great. It gives me chills on my my erector pill I stand on it. It's fun. Anyways,
No,
that's my
I get you. And like,
easy to do.
I have a pretty small channel, just over 400 subs, but I've gotten a couple of those emails, and they really just made my entire week when I got them. Like the first one was after, like I said, a back and forth I had with Paul Price. I mentioned that earlier. The second and third ones were after my latest debate with Kent Hovind. Just people saying, "Hey, you made me look into the science a bit, and I want to learn more." Just
Awesome.
Just hearing that.
That's it.
That made the hundreds of hours I put into my channel worth it.
No, that's it. That's what it's about.
I'm tiny, but
yeah, but everybody
really good.
Everybody who gets big starts small. So I'll leave you with that. We're gonna watch some more.
Yeah. Let's do
Ideas
it.
can be carefully documented in the court trial, and the same thing is with claims of a Bacillosaurus. That's a rescue device. Which my question is, how did they reproduce until they had those organs? With their feet, how are they going to reproduce?
What do you mean?
How did they reproduce until they had them?
They always had them.
The argument is that they're going away. So what is he talking? How did they reproduce till they had them? Which animal doesn't have them?
So what I find to be interesting here. Oh, go ahead.
Matt say this in a video. Wait, was it in the book he and Standing for Truth wrote? I remember you reading this out, Erica. Like, Raw Matt thought that humans lost their erector muscle and had to re-evolve it after losing the baculum.
I have purged the Raw Matt section of that text from my memory. It did psychic damage to me. I can't handle it. Jay and Dapper, you guys both had something to say as well.
Go ahead, Dapper.
Okay. The only thing I really have to say is the only way that you can think that this is something that whales needed to evolve rather than just something they retained from their ancestors is if you think that a pelvis isn't basal to Artiodactyla, which, like, have you ever met a deer or a cow or an antelope or a chevrotain or a camel? I can tell you they've got hips. All of them.
And they use them to kick you, to kick the shit out of you.
They use them for kicking. They use them
Those
for
hips
walking.
don't lie.
They also, and here's the real big secret, they also use them for reproduction.
But Dapper, how did they reproduce before they had them? Like, come on.
Well, if we want to go to before they had them, then we're going all the way back to, like, Eusthenopteron, in which case external fertilization.
So I want to say here too, like, Bergman's on my list. Bergman is on my list. He published a book a while back called, like, Humans and Apes or something like that. It's a anti-human evolution text. And if memory serves, one of the things that he uses to distinguish humans from non-humans, and when I say that, I mean the human kind versus the non-human ape kind, is the prominent projecting nasal bone. So he uses the example of, like, a chimp couldn't wear glasses because they don't have that prominent external nose, the bridge of the nose, to set the glasses on. First of all, a proboscis monkey could wear glasses, right? Like, you don't need it's a silly thing to propose because, like, the soft tissue itself could manage. But more importantly, you guys know what creationists typically say about like Homo floresiensis, right? It's just a dwarfed human. That's what they like to say. They're like, it's just a dwarfed human. That's all it is. Have you ever seen LB1? It doesn't have prominent nasal bones. LB1 couldn't wear glasses. So using Bergman's logic completely it's like you guys were saying earlier, right? It completely derails every other creationist's take on hominins and who's just a degraded human and who is an ape, for lack of a better term, right? That's what they call them, the ape kind. So, like, his criteria don't work. So it doesn't surprise me that Bergman is turned around here because he's been turned around on so many other things. But I wasn't going to get to have another place to say that,
So my thing was, and it might seem random, but you keep hearing them use this deriding term, rescue device.
Yeah.
And it's like, if rescue devices are bad things, don't read the Gospels. But more to the point, like, because I think words matter. It shows me that because that's a device we would use to critique a story, a plot, a novel, right? It shows that they're thinking of these as two competing stories, and that itself misrepresents what's really at stake when we talk about evolution versus creationism. But they think to their audience, they can convey this as our story versus their stories. And here's this plot device they use to get themselves out of a jam. I know it seems like I'm nitpicking about the language, but it says a lot to me.
No, Jay, I don't think you're nitpicking. I think it's important. They've been using rescuing device. I think that's a Jeanson original, isn't it, Dan?
Is that a Jeanson? I know Jeanson's a fan of it. I don't.
I think it's either Jeanson or Stadler.
It's become very widespread since it originated. Yeah. Whoever did it.
Interesting.
You know the answer to that question.
To me, whenever a creationist says this is a rescuing device, what I hear is this is a reason my argument fails, and I want to use a buzzword in order to make you think that it hasn't failed.
So, but here's the thing.
Personally, I just think that rescue devices. Oh, sorry, Erica.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, personally, yeah. Every time I hear rescue devices, I pretty much just hear like an answer to the question that they pose. Like anytime you answer a question or problem that a creationist has, they'll just label that a rescue device. So what I find really fun is in debates, oftentimes whenever a creationist will say something that is like just so outlandish, like talking about how, the mosasaurs didn't have lungs and the basilosaurs did have lungs, and that explains the difference. I'll be like, yeah, that rescue device doesn't work because X, Y, and Z. I like to flip it on them and call a lot of their pretty crazy answers just rescue devices.
So what kills me about that is like the rescue device, and forgive me for the tangent, but like the rescue device, I think speaks, this is why I think it's important you brought it up, Jay, to something a lot deeper about where they're coming from. Because to them, a rescue device is, and you guys correct me if you've had a different experience, anytime science changes and can accommodate a creationist problem. Right?
Yeah,
it's anytime, especially when it previously was unsolved. So, for instance, let's say you have a gap in the fossil record, quote unquote, a gap, and then all of a sudden you find this fossil specimen that's the right place, the right morphology, and it seems to fill it. Well, now that critter has become a rescue device, right? Or previously they're like, a classic example. They're like, you can't explain how you get the, X amount of mutations in humans and chimpanzees as compared to the mutation rates of other primates. And it's like, well, you have a hominin slowdown hypothesis. They're like, no, that's a rescuing device, except the fact that hominins have a slower mutation rate is directly measured. That's not a rescuing device. That's science advancing as it should. But where they're coming from, which is a very rigid interpretation of the Bible that is their interpretation again, nothing changes ever. And if it does, something is wrong and it's your problem. It's not the problem with the text that you're looking at.
I think to go along with that, it's a projection in the sense that I know we've had this experience where you say you're having a debate or a conversation about something and you deal with that, and it feels like they just find something to say. Like their thing is, I need to find something to say that gets me out of a jam. And so they're turning that accusation onto science, and saying that science actually whips evidence out of nowhere anytime it finds itself in a jam. Yeah,
because they want to see science as what they do.
Yeah.
Like they're doing what I'm doing, which I'm just trying to save face here, instead of what science actually intends to do, which
evangelical naturalism.
Yeah.
Also, what plays into this so perfectly is like when you say that they're trying to make it sound like they're the ones doing science, they also will oftentimes say, "Oh, evolution is just a religion." They'll try to say, we're the ones doing science and you guys are the ones doing the religion. It's like just projecting to just an absurd degree.
Well, and that speaks to again a complete lack of understanding of the historical background of this. Not a single one of these guys has read Origin or any scientific paper that hasn't been quote mined in segments in a creationist like piece, right? They're not concerned with that. They have their interpretation. Anything that violates that is getting booted. It's so weird because it's exactly the quote that they were using earlier, but it's with data for them, right? Like if it doesn't fit the narrative, it's dropped. That's it's a weird little deal. So
hey,
okay,
so,
let's look.
Hey, how far did we get in the video while I was gone?
I don't know,
minutes.
Dan. 6 minutes and 10 seconds?
Did we even move a second? Maybe 5.
No. When Dan left, we were still on Super Chats. We're doing really
True.
well.
No, I left at the end of Super Chat, so you did like 6 minutes, assuming you started at the beginning.
We did not. We started about 45 seconds in.
So
we started 45 seconds.
you know, you're doing great. We're doing great. We're doing great.
We're really killing it. Okay.
Erica
really,
is trying to keep us moving along, to her credit.
well,
So,
well,
We gotta get
Right,
like
that's
those
great.
chess
That's a great point.
timers.
There's so many major
everyone gets like
changes.
5 minutes an hour.
Oh, that's a great idea,
Yeah, you do the
actually.
chess
Oh,
timer, yeah.
that would be fun.
what we need is like a taser that's attached to all of us, and if we go on a tangent that lasts more than 5 minutes, it zaps
Get
us
zapped.
to keep going.
That would be
I mean,
also
then
really
the
good if
stream
any of
would
us
just
get
be
bit
filled
by
with
a snake.
oohs.
Then the
I knew someone was
Exactly.
going to make the joke. I knew
We'll
someone
be
was going to
immune to
do it.
snake
Thank you.
bite. Great stuff.
Yep, there you go. All right,
Not
let's
medical
keep going.
advice.
Let's do it.
I'm going.
That would have to take place to go from a land dwelling mammal like Pakicetus to a whale like Basilosaurus, a blue whale. Can you touch on some of those changes? Maybe like, obviously they'd have to give birth to live young in the water. Now they'd have to have the
in the
nostrils
water.
move to the back of the head as a blowhole.
right.
It's easy though. Can
Yeah, a
we
lot of
pause
changes
for a
I thought-
second?
I think-
This is the first thing that I feel like I can comment on that we've talked, that I've been here all day. I can finally comment on something with some degree of confidence in my answer. So this is a very common misconception, this idea that like changing morphology from, like, for example, a walking leg to a fin, right? Or elongating one structure into a different structure, right? It's a common misconception that this is something that's like difficult to do in an evolutionary sense. But when you look at the actual like regulation that's going on during development, this is actually really easy to do, because we don't have like a gene that says make an eye here and you activate that gene in like 2 sets of tissue in your head, and you have genes that say put an arm here, put a leg here. What we do is we have these very general commands that certain types of genes, that are regulatory genes, can induce during development. Things like extend from the dorsal midline, or fold inwards, or branch, whatever tissue layer you're dealing with. So what you have to do when you are like, experiencing selection to go from one kind of morphological structure to another, what you're doing is you're changing the expression pattern of these genes. You're not changing the build a leg gene into the build a limb or build a fin gene. What you're doing is you're changing the relative expression patterns so that the bones, the elongate gene is expressed for a shorter amount of time, and the extend flat gene is expressed for a longer amount of time, right? You have fewer of the branch genes being expressed, so you fuse your digits. But you end up with the structure that has all the same basic parts, that's built using the same basic commands. You're just changing the proportions and the timing of how they're expressed during embryonic development. And this has been super well documented. One of my favorite examples of this is feathers, because feathers and scales are the same structure developmentally. They're homologous structures. And it's just 2 genes. One gene says extend outwards, one gene says fold inwards. They kind of do opposite things. And scales in reptiles, you express these genes kind of in a checkerboard pattern on the skin. So you end up with regions folding in and then adjacent regions folding over. And that's how you get your scales, right? Well,
Yeah.
if you express those genes in a bullseye pattern instead, that gets you your tube feathers. If you express them in a like a wheel, like a wagon wheel with spokes pattern, that's how you get your tufted like insulation feathers. And if you express them in a temporal dependent way, in a time dependent way, where first you do the tube kind of hollow cone expression pattern, and then you express them with one gene on one side and the other one radiating around it, that's how you get your veined feathers for flight. It's the same 2 genes, you're just expressing them in different temporal and spatial patterns to get different morphologies. It's just like folding a piece of paper in different ways to get different paper airplanes. It's the same set of commands. So you don't have to like evolve all the genes to like grow a fin or whatever. It's just the same sets of genes expressed in different patterns. And this is extraordinarily well understood. And every time this comes up, they're like, oh, where do you get the new information to move? It's all the same stuff. You're just tweaking the expression pattern during development.
Well, and that's the crux of it, right? Is that it's like this isn't just theoretical. A lot of this stuff has been experimentally demonstrated in the lab
Yup.
in critters that like alligators,
Yeah.
like you can induce like
There you go.
feather, you know, and
Yeah.
which shouldn't be the case in a gator. Why does it have all the equipment for that? You know,
You can induce the growth of the tubular feathers in alligators. Yeah, in the lab. Yup.
Yeah. So you know, I mean, I think it's interesting too for this cetacean conversation, because what you were talking about, Dan, earlier would have fit in a lot better, because it's like we were talking about, you know, the gaining of a limb from something like a sarcopterygian fish. Like, how do you get a
same thing.
humerus, a radius, and an ulna, and then after that the metacarpals, and then the carpals, and then the metacarpals, and then the phalanges. How do you get that? And it's just like, you know, it's a classic example of these cascades that induce each other, and when they are duplicated, you can do it in a chicken. You can give a chicken fingers by duplicating these patches that are for these distal phalanges. It's really cool stuff, and there's really stark pictures of it to make the case. But for the case of cetaceans, more or less, you're removing stuff, right? Like, you're taking things away
Most of the time,
most of the time, right? At least
Which
in the case
creationists should say is easier, because it's easier to break a machine than build a machine, right?
So here's what gets me, and I was saving this punchline for later, but I think it's better suited now, right? What Donnie is going to say here in a little bit is, he's like, how do you go from an itty bitty Indohyus to something the size of a blue whale? And like, that's an intuitively compelling thing, but in the end, right, what they're requiring multiple times over the course of the created kind sort of model, they're requiring a lot more in a lot less time, right? Like, they're requiring the evolution of many different integrated systems, whether you're talking about whales or pinnipeds or whatever, that have to come about in 4,400 years. You know, if you want to take their word for it and say they took one type of sauropod onto the ark, how are you going to get a titanosaur from that? That's a lot of evolution, depending on the type of sauropod you brought on the ark.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
by the way, sorry.
You go ahead, Dapper.
By the way, with the how do you get something from as small as Pachycetus to as big as a blue whale? I actually ran the math on that, and if you do how much would you need each generation to increase in size on average to get a smooth transition from one size to the next over the time available, using very generous assumptions for, you know, the making this as hard as possible, it's a fraction of a percent. That's average increase in size. It's just trivial. It's the rough equivalent is like, let's say that you're a 2 meter tall human, and your kids on average are 2 meters and about 4 millimeters tall. That's the kind of, like, you couldn't even notice it, is the amount of ridiculously small change in average size per generation. It's just a nothing.
It's just it's a nothing burger, right? It's appealing to intuition. It's appealing to incredulity. It's not any more than that. And again, it's so weird that they make this argument with cetaceans. Like, how do you get all these complex systems when they didn't make it with tetrapods? It seems like a weird inverse. But
I do think Dan's point is huge in that, you know, creationism is so dishonest. You wonder, it seems resilient to almost all forms of education and evidence.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a real way in which understanding regulation and development does way more to kill creationism than, you know, the current language that they're working with, right? Because they do have that sort of monkey at typewriter vision, where I have to get it from typing out whale to getting it to typing out monkey, and they just fail to understand even an example as common as like PAX genes or something, just some of the common things we use when we're teaching these things that makes you go, oh, wow, regulation and development takes, you know, almost no genetic differences and gives you the, you know, huge differences, and it makes so much as makes sense. And they just are so, you know, swimming in the dark essentially by not being able to factor that into their thinking.
Well, I mean, you're right, Jay. Like, they're going to continue that here in a moment. I'm going to let him keep going.
Yeah, let's let it go.
In a minute and touch on it again, because you're right.
When I gave an example, that professor from University of Kansas, I think they really have a hard time arguing for the evolution of whales, and they do it the best they can, I guess. And it's not. I don't remember all the arguments I used in my paper. It's been like 20 years ago, but I have a book I did on the whole whale issue, and I haven't gotten it published yet. I need to find a publisher. I want to have a lot of illustrations.
Okay.
That will be important for this kind of book, but
Yes.
I can only do one thing at a time, and I'm trying to
Talk to
rewriting my
Donnie.
way through.
He's published like
So
5 or
much good
6 books.
information.
It literally Dapper. Actually, yeah, he should collab. They should collab.
Although someone really needs to get through to Donnie that putting a truncated hyperlink in blue and underlined in a text that is printed doesn't really do anything.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's bad.
That I want to rewrite it quite extensively, partially because my first book is the first book that really pointed directly in the idea that this whole concern was racism. And I need to defend that better, and I need to go into more detail to a lot of these things that I raised in my first book. So,
Did he say
Very
racism?
good.
He said
did.
racism.
I'm trying to understand that.
I think so. In general, I want to assume the best here, and I think that he's going for like role one created whatever, right? I think that's kind of where he's going with this. AIG leans really heavy into this.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably what they're going for, which, like, great, good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not
Let's
going to
help with that
complain
one
about
thing.
saying races aren't real, even if your reason is Adam and Eve. Like,
You know
you're
what?
right
Yeah.
for the wrong reasons,
Yeah,
but fine.
like,
I'll
Go with
take
it.
Yeah, broken clock, right? I mean,
Sure,
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I
I'll
think
take it.
he's doing it. He does it based off because he wrote he wrote that book on like human evolution, the glasses one that I mentioned earlier, Floresiensis. I think that he does the whole evolution was used to promote racism and like all that kind of shit, and it's like, well, yeah, that's true, and that's not good.
That's
right?
what I was trying to understand. I was trying to understand his claim. So is he saying I was trying to understand if he's saying he's being accused of racism or he has a problem with thinking evolution is racist or something else. I'm
I
trying to
still think it's
understand.
the second one. I
It
think it's the
sounded
second
like
one.
so. It sounded.
Yeah.
It sounded like
It's
he was
a
trying to make
social
the argument that the scientists are just too racist to actually figure out what these fossils are actually displaying.
Well,
Okay.
I think for me, it's more like I think he's going the social Darwinism route. Like
It's
he's
an
like
evolution
oh,
is racist
you-
thing.
Yeah, like if you
Okay.
accept evolution, then you're going to be a social Darwinist, and then
Okay.
it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with like subjugating people because
Yeah.
might means right, and like all that bullshit that you do.
Darwinism equals eugenics.
Well,
Yeah,
Type
exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
It is important to recognize the historical use of various scientific ideas in biology, both correct
Yeah.
and incorrect,
Yes.
Yeah, for
to
sure.
support racist action all over the place.
I mean, just anthropology as a whole.
Right, but there's
Oh,
there's two big caveats going in there. One is if you think that the solution is the Bible, I've got news for you about other things that have been used to justify racist actions in the past when it comes to the Bible. And the other thing I have to point out to you is that that's just an argument from consequences. Even if it were true, 100% true, that acceptance of evolution always led to horrible racism, that wouldn't be an argument that evolution isn't true.
And it helps that that's not the case, you know. Like it's
Well, yeah,
it's
it does
one of-
help. Yeah.
you know, but it's like I get what you're going for.
Yes,
I
and
think that's his move.
I was going to say, I also argue for the inverse of this, which is to remind people, what if we found evidence of these differences between groups? That wouldn't make it moral to treat, like, if you
I
found that on
love
average black
creating-
people were less intelligent, would that make racism okay? Like, no.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Should you
yeah.
treat people poorly because they're not as smart as you? I sure hope not.
Yeah,
Right. Human
Like,
dignity is going to be a thing one way or the other. So, like,
exactly.
act
Yes.
accordingly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's like I 100% agree if that was the case, and it's nice
no,
that
it's
it's
Matt.
also not the case. Like,
Yeah, Erica, I always say we're lucky.
Yeah.
We're lucky that
We're
the
lucky.
science is on the side of humanism in this case.
yeah, we're in a good spot. So I skipped over the Grady McMurdy part because I watched it earlier and it was boring. So I figured it'd be more fun to kind of finish this stream off. Dan, I'm sorry, I don't think we're gonna get to genetics. I'm really
Wait,
sorry.
sorry, is that Hank Green on screen?
It is.
It is. They're going through a crash course.
Oh, wow, I was
Really
joking. It
young,
actually
oh my
is.
goodness.
No, yeah, that's
Yeah.
baby Hank Green.
It's
Oh, this
baby
is that
Hank
Matt
Green.
Oh,
person you've been
wow.
talking about, right? So
Yeah,
now I
that-
get to
that's-
introduce to this guy.
Oh, good luck. Good luck. He is rough to listen to.
You're-
Wait,
Cheers,
Jay,
gang.
you don't
I'm
know
taking
Matt?
a shot. No, I've never seen this person.
Oh,
Really? You never saw what was it?
What?
Crash Course in high
are
school?
you sure?
No,
okay,
no. He's talking about raw Matt.
Matt,
Right-
yeah.
Raw Matt.
Jay-
Yeah, I don't know Raw
Jay,
Matt.
are you
Oh.
sure you want to stay for this? Because if you stay, never again can you go back to this time in your life
Yeah.
before
You're-
you had ever encountered raw
you're-
mat.
Right.
I took a shot.
Dapper,
I'm
what
here.
are all of your
All right.
drinking
This
rules?
is-
I feel
think we
like it's
need to
about set
implement
and
them.
setting. If I'm ever going to deal with this, these are the people I need to be surrounded by
Fair.
to handle it.
It's like a
No,
bad trip.
okay,
It's like it's
D-
okay.
Dapper,
You're
I
around
need
Yeah,
to know,
people.
what are all of your
Exactly.
drinking rules? We
I'm
need them
gonna-
to survive.
I'm gonna
Yes.
break some really lovely news to you guys. Most of this part, at least to the point that I watched it to, is Donnie centered. So we're
Okay.
fortunate in
Okay,
that
so
light.
Erica, question. Can we find a particularly egregiously bad raw mat part to watch? Just for fun?
Dude, I've got a whole raw mat video that we
Oh,
can
but-
pivot to if we want
Open
to.
up your
Oh,
bookmarks
please.
folder.
We'll get
you know?
through
Let's-
2 minutes in the next 4 hours. It'll be great.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I said earlier in the chat, as long as we finish by the time Dapper's stream starts on Friday, we're good.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hey
take the
guys,
long
subscribe
weekend.
to my channel. I've got a birthday stream coming up. It's going to be great.
Look, we
Oh,
can
no way.
go-
What is it? 145.42?
So it's hard to keep track because the length of the year has changed, both in terms of just day and also, there's been orbital shifts here and there. So I would have to double check because Landon Knoll, a world-class mathematician and planetary scientist who has multiple world records for finding prime numbers, went through and calculated my actual age, and it's 1 plus whatever that was last year.
Okay, sorry, not to make fun of mathematicians, though they deserve it. You can get credit for finding prime numbers.
Yes, generally speaking, they have to be certain categories of prime numbers because there are subcategories. And
There are
if you can
categories?
there are categories. If you can find like the biggest of this particular kind of prime number, you get recognized for that.
Just keep counting.
Also, this is the guy who
Okay, I'm sorry,
informed
my
me
mind
that
is just being blown.
that Feynman's favorite D&D class was Bard, and he used to bring in his bongos to play when they played D&D together.
It's fantastic.
Wow.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Fantastic.
All right, let's get into this
Let's do it.
craziness.
Oh, wait, sorry. Now I need to know, what's everyone's favorite D&D class?
I don't even know them.
Monk.
Oh,
No,
Monk
but
is good.
I play barbarian. I bonk. That's my move. I come in, I bonk.
I
Monk.
changed it up so much, it's
Rogue
hard to
Monk.
say. I usually play spellcasters just because I like the flexibility. And also because, they don't have their power scale way down at high levels.
I looked up D&D classes, and it's like, sign up for Dungeons and Dragons classes for kids. Not
Word.
those classes. Not those classes. You're not helping me right
Character
now.
classes. You need the word character in there.
Okay.
Jay, you're involved in biology.
See,
You can
I-
just pick Druid as a nice default.
You can.
Yeah.
I will.
Hey,
No,
Druid's
no, that's
fun,
only for. That's only for
especially
I think
for
I'm
biology.
going wizard. I've always had a thing
Wizard?
for trying to
Okay.
be a wizard.
So I'm
That's
going to
fair.
ask you guys now. We
Now-
got we
Now,
we
hear me
have
out
met-
though.
Hold on a second here.
Monk
We're
Don.
is
never going to
on.
get this started.
Let me,
Oh,
yeah, let
sorry.
me get us covered here for a quick second. So we find ourselves at a divergent path. We can watch Donnie work his way through whale evolution, or we could watch Raw Matt on his channel Young Earth Creation tackle the end of evolution, or alternatively,
Oh.
many other videos that are
Raw
here.
Matt,
Radiometric
do
did
it.
improve
The end of
some-
evolution, raw
You know
Matt.
what?
Let's go.
Raw Matt, let's
Come
do it.
on.
If we're getting towards the end of the stream, we got to
End of stream, end of evolution. There you
Yeah.
go.
Let's do it.
Okay. Let me get my points off here because I told Donnie I would do it. Donnie, here's what you got wrong in this whale evolution video. I watched it earlier. So first of all, you still don't understand. You still don't understand synapomorphies. You don't understand that the reason the involucrum clocks Indohyus as a cetacean and an artiodactyl, just as every subsequent cetacean is an artiodactyl, is an artiodactyl, is because that involucrum is exclusive to cetaceans now and in the past. It is your drawn through line. You also see the emergence of these characters, like the density of bones, which matches where they're living and how they're moving to become these more aquatic critters. You like to classify them as only terrestrial, only transitional, or only aquatic, and yet every single one of them that is clocked as a cetacean in that lineage has an antelope's ankle and an involucrum. So they have a terrestrial antelope characteristic and a purely modern whale characteristic. Those are the two traits that link them in a lineage, not an anagenetic one, but a lineage all the same. And again, I would like to point out that yes, when you say that Inohyus is an artiodactyl, it is also a cetacean. Those two things can simultaneously be true. I think that's all I've got, except for the fact that you also find them in geologic succession. So it's morphologic change over geologic time, which is really important. It's awfully odd that the flood, or the post-flood for that matter, would bury them in that order, particularly given the common niches that they share with other animals that are either distinctly above or distinctly below them in the geologic column.
By the way, when it comes to whales being both cetaceans and artiodactyls, because cetaceans are a subset, of artiodactyls, I want to point out that is some very basic level intuitive set theory that humans start to develop an understanding of at approximately 6 months of age.
Wait, say that again, Dapper?
So basic set theory, the ability to say that this is a smaller subset of a larger set, is something that humans start to be able to understand around 6 months of age, where they can understand that things like, my pet is a dog, and that is another dog over there, but it is not my pet. So when Donnie persistently refuses to understand that cetacean is part of Artiodactyla, he is showing a level of brain development that would be delayed if he were 6 months old.
Well, I was going to say, is this a problem for Donnie or for Raw Matt?
Both.
It's both. I mean, I'm gonna make it clear, right? Like, this isn't a complicated concept. You have these suites of characteristics that unite organisms in an ancestor-descendant relationship. You've got these synapomorphies, and that goes in tandem with the fact that modern cetaceans are most closely related to hippos. They have an enormous suite of genes dedicated to olfaction that are all turned off, which only makes sense if you previously used a sense of smell and now no longer do. They fully develop partial hind limb buds in the womb that are then resorbed, and then they also sometimes carry those to adulthood. And when they do, these little guys look like more prehistoric whales. None of this makes any sense. We shouldn't have a fossil series that also shows the migration of the blowhole as it moves up the side of the face. We shouldn't have transitionals that have some teeth and some baleen to get the baleen whales that we have today. None of that makes any sense under the light of young Earth creationism, and is only explained under the light of evolutionary theory. And so I feel quite satisfied. In reality, I was not quite satisfied, because I wanted to go through the rest of that video and touch on all the fossil stuff, etc., etc. I did like a little spiel there at the end, but I really think there's a lot to dissect here. So you can, as I said at the beginning of this video, you can expect that coming later. Please make sure that you subscribe to everybody who's on the panel. They were there on their own volition, helping me out because they're cool people. So do me a favor and subscribe to them. Their links are in the description. The video that we cover next, as mentioned in this video, is one by Raw Matt, so that's going to be the last video that is released in this sort of stream breakup. You can expect it a week from when this video released, or if you're in the future, you can watch it now. You might get some brain damage though. Anyways, thank you for watching, and from the bottom of my gentle and of course very modern heart, I want to let you know that you are in fact a very curious primate for doing so, and I'll see you really soon next time.